Hello and welcome along, I'm Chris Hall and this is Hall's Variety Pack Off the Record. It is our third visual instalment and our third instalment in which we're talking about Doctor Who. Hooray! I kind of think that I should probably give it some kind of more Doctor Who-y title for when I'm talking about this kind of thing. But that's something I could worry about in my own time. Of course, if you have any suggestions on what I could call this episode, this Doctor Who-y inspired thing, then just leave a comment in the comment section down below. Maybe you've got some kind of observance that you have on this week's episode of Doctor Who, or maybe just a general question you want to ask. Just leave a comment and I'll probably get back to you in next week's episode, because if it's anything like this week's episode, there's not a great deal for me to talk about, because this is an episode which I really liked. There's no major problems with it, so there's nothing for me to get bitter and bitchy about. So, what are we going to do with the time? Well, we'll start off by giving a brief rundown of the plot. Now, I should point out here and now that this episode, like the previous ones I've done, is going to be fairly spoiler heavy. So if you don't want this episode ruined at all, then it's probably best that you switch the video off or watch something else. There's probably a load of brilliant videos on this side of the YouTubey thing. Maybe there's a video or two that I've done, like a video review or something. Click on that, see what else I do when I'm not talking about Doctor Who. But in the meantime, let us talk about the plot. This is just a brief plot synopsis. So, the Doctor asks Clara whom she'd like to see in history, a great historical figure. She says she wants to see Robin Hood. So the Doctor scoffs at that because Robin Hood isn't real. So the Doctor goes to a vague point in time in which Robin Hood may exist. And lo and behold, in almost sitcom-esque style, he does exist. Ooh, cool, blimey jumbo. But you know what? It turns out the Doctor and Robin Hood don't get along, and they're quite bitter towards each other as well. And not only does Robin Hood exist, but the Sheriff of Nottingham also exists, and he's just a bigger meanie as he is in the books. Grr. What's more, he's stealing people's gold for purposes which are not quite nice. Grr. Will the Doctor and Robin Hood save the day? Well, what the hell do you think? That would be an edit point, but I think I should probably say the next bit I'm going to talk about is, well, the one flaw with this episode. Oh, it does kind of feel a little bit more than a flaw now that I've done this video several times in rehearsal. Oh dear. Okay, so stop me if you've heard this one before. Of course, I say stop me, that's a bit of a rhetorical thing. All you can really do to stop me is close the window or pause the video. But don't do that, because that'd be rather unfortunate and it'd make me cry. Anyway, the story, the proper big story to this episode is like this. Robots from space crash on Earth somewhere in the past. They may themselves be from the future, or they may be from the same time period but from another planet. They crash land and they need to repair their ship because, oh, call blimey jumbo, we don't like it here. Grr, 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 XOXOXO. So what they do is they go to the local populace and they start taking parts from them to repair their spaceship to return to whence they came. Alright, this is a bit where it gets a little bit confusing because the Sheriff of Nottingham wants to use the spaceship and the robots to go to London to kill Prince John and to become King of England, though there is a computer screen which says that the destination is the Promised Land, which is their attempt to try and link this episode into the series' story arc, and kind of then makes the entire bad guy's motivations seem a little bit more cloudy and confused. That happens, and then the Doctor finds out, oh, God blimey, these robots are up to no good. Better go and stop them. He discovers that they're going to the Promised Land. He looks at the computer screen and pulls his face as though to say, oh, bugger. The spaceship starts to take off, and the Doctor thus far has been going, oh, you robot men, don't fly this spaceship because it's not ready to fly, and if it flies it'll explode and kill everyone. And they try to fly it, it starts flying, and then the Doctor stops it and saves the day. Okay, so this is a little bit me being pedantic and sarcastic. What I'm trying to say is that this episode is Now, how do I say this in a way that doesn't make it sound as if I'm being slanderous? This episode is coincidentally similar to the first episode of this series. Almost beat for beat similar. It is about robots from space, or the future, or both, crashing landing in the past, and then using parts sourced by the local populace. In the first episode, it was body parts. In this episode, it's gold to repair a spaceship, but the spaceship isn't ready and will blow up and kill everyone if it does. That's the setup to the episode in the first episode, and that's the setup to the episode in this one. Look, to put it in bold terms, I'm not saying that for any one moment that anyone involved with this episode or the series as a whole has been copying from one another. I'm not saying that. I just think it's incredibly coincidental and a little bit difficult to believe that no one in the production from this series looked at this episode and the first episode and did not think to themselves, these two episodes look a little bit familiar, because they are familiar. It's the same storyline, for God's sake, albeit in the case with this one, this Robin Hood episode, it's done far and away better. There's no dumb, silly moments within it, bar the whole thing with the Promised Land bit, which just kind of make the whole thing a bit, what's the bad guy really doing here? I don't think he knows. But apart from that, it's a great episode, even if it is like for like the same. Though, with that said, watching it, it didn't really feel like that to me. It's only when I was writing this little observation of the episode that it kind of dawned upon me, oh bollocks, we've already done this. Not even in the case of, oh, we did this last series, or we did this 2 series ago. We did this 2 episodes ago. But still, the episode is itself, bearing in mind that it is the same episode as the first one, is great and fantastic. All the bad things from the first episode aren't here and replaced by good things, which means it's a guest written episode, which is a filler episode, which is good. Yay! Bar the whole thing and the fact that it is the first episode again. Apart from that, yay! And here's another thing here. The Robin Hood in this. Oh, blimey. Here's an elephant in the room for you. A few years ago, the BBC, as kind of like a alternative to Doctor Who, a series that they were going to have on when Doctor Who wasn't on, they decided to do a new adaptation of Robin Hood. Now, needless to say, I thought that adaptation of Robin Hood was shit. It was melodramatic, poorly designed, with some awful CGI and all the very, very bad melodramatic cliches that we have in Doctor Who. And this may be the fact that it's also done by BBC Wales, it may just be the same people working on it, not realising that having a Welsh guy in the background going, oh, does not itself quantify for drama and suspense, but whatever. With that said, the elephant in the room here is the fact that this little episode, this 1F episode, which realistically, in the grand scheme of Doctor Who, will not be considered one of the greats and may not be considered the greatest of this series, is far and away a better Robin Hood thing than the Robin Hood thing that we had a few years ago, which was a proper Robin Hood thing. I mean, here's the real sad part about this. I really, really like this episode as a Robin Hood thing. Cut out all the Doctor Who space-time wibbly-wobbly bollocks out of it. This is a great episode of a potential series of Robin Hood. And the sad thing is they're not going to make it as a series of Robin Hood because of the fact that he's so soon after they tried and failed the first time round, and the fact that it would kind of make it feel a little bit too much like a spin-off. But still, this episode was fantastic. I mean, I really loved it. It was really exciting and boisterous and entertaining. It was light and enjoyable. There was no melodrama there. There was no silly attempts at some kind of contemporary swing to it. It was what it was. It was Robin Hood and Doctor Who together for the first time in the series' history, and it worked really, really well. It's just a shame that we're not going to get a proper Robin Hood now, because he looked the part, he acted the part, he dressed the part, and what's more, he was a more three-dimensional character because he had a little bit in his background. He really, really missed Maid Marian. As far as he was concerned, Maid Marian was dead for one reason or another. He was missing her. And the whole reason why he was the hearty, laughing, thigh-slapping, bantering guy he was because he was terrified and lonely. And this entire thing, the whole him being terrified and lonely, wasn't through some melodramatic bit. It wasn't through, like in the second episode where we had Mr. Pink and the little kid going, "Sir, did you ever kill anybody accidentally?" Tear down the face moment. We didn't have that with this. It was a short exchange between Clara and Robin Hood. Clara said something along the lines of, "You're laughing to hide something," or something like that. I can't remember. It's something like, "What are you trying to hide by laughing?" And he kind of goes, "Well," and I think it's then rumbled. I can't remember where he says it or she says that she's missing someone or something, or whether she says that he's missing someone or something, and then he says, "Oh yeah, I've not seen Maid Marian in a very long time. I'm very, very worried about her." Still, of course, that exchange isn't as good as the Mr. Pink one, albeit with the tear around the eye bit. It still was a hell of a lot more subtle than a lot of things we got in Doctor Who. And the episode was great. Everyone in it was great. Okay, the merry men were kind of almost on the level of depth in personality as animatronics that you see at a fairground, but still, they were fun and enjoyable. They did absolutely nothing, but they were there, and they looked the part. I know that some people are getting the knives out over this episode because of the fact that it wasn't some deep, dark, clinical deconstruction of Robin Hood and what it means, man, and the fact that Sheriff of Nottingham wasn't some kind of evil banker guy, as some kind of very lame attempt at making analogies for the modern day issues and stuff. But still, for what it was, for the depth and necessary drawing of the characters, it was fantastic. Everyone played their role as best as they possibly could do, even surpassing it in some instances. So, great! Okay, so this is a filler episode. We have to get that clear. We have to get that out of the open. This is a filler episode. Any guest written episode in Doctor Who is always a filler episode because it's written without the knowledge and forewarning of what's going to come in this series. Any kind of connection to the story arc is always going to be shoehorned in. Like in this one, we've got the computer screen which says Destination Promised Land or words to that effect. And as filler episodes go, yes, it's fantastic. I can't go over the fact that how fantastic it is. It's probably the best episode of Doctor Who I've seen in a very, very long time. Far better than stuff that we've had in the past 3 years, I dare say. It's enjoyable, fun, boisterous, with loads of character and colour and charm to it. And the Doctor and Clara, well, there's nothing else I can say about them that I've not said before. The Doctor is just as good as he has been. Peter Capaldi as the Doctor is a real revelation. He's probably the best Doctor, probably since Christopher Eccleston, in my humble opinion. There is a kind of a thing that he does kind of, in this episode, seem a little bit, I don't know, maybe poorly realised in some regards. There seems a bit of a disconnect between how he was acting in the previous 2 episodes and how he's acting in this one, but still, it's great. And Clara, well, what can I say about Clara? I really hated her when she first joined the show, but thus far in this series she's been great. This episode she was a little bit more airy-fairy, a little bit more like a giddy schoolgirl, but Jesus, she's meeting one of her old-time heroes. She's meeting Robin Hood, for crying out loud. As far as she was concerned, he was just a fictional character who may or may not exist. Now she knows that he exists, and she's everything that she could possibly have dreamt of. Of course she's going to act like a giddy schoolgirl, for God's sake. The episode was great. I can't get over the fact how good this episode was. It's not the greatest episode of Doctor Who. It's not an episode that I'll go away and say that this is one of my top 10 favourite episodes of Doctor Who. I dare say it'd make it into the top 20, but still, this whole episode felt like an oasis in a desert of crap. Okay, last week's episode wasn't bad, but it was kind of only really good in comparison to the first episode. The first episode was naff. Just really naff. If we were frank and honest, it wasn't good. And it's strange that, really, if you compare this first episode with this one, this episode, this third episode, is everything that the first episode should have been. In terms of character development, in terms of pacing and placing, cinematography, everything. There was no red herrings, there was no dumb moment, there was no, "Don't worry, young one, there's ample air in my young's bit." Everyone in this episode had relationships and personalities that really worked. And this episode should really stand as an example to Stephen Moffat of how you really do write characters, how you do subtlety. Because he really needs to learn how to do subtle. He really does. Okay, so as an overview, and my voice won't start getting squeaky and crackly again, as I need to calm down now. As a whole, needless to say, I really enjoyed the episode. It was fantastic and great and good. If you've not seen it, though you decided to watch a spoiler video instead, it was great, really enjoyable, and I highly recommend that you watch it. I hope that this is going to be the turning point for this series, that the rest of the series, the other 9 or so episodes that we got of this series, are going to be just as good. And I hope that next week's episode will live up to the high standard brought forward in this one. Whether it will or not is hard to say, because this is a Stephen Moffat episode that we're going into next week, and it's Stephen Moffat on his own. If you go on this week on this series' progress thus far, the only episode with Stephen Moffat on his own was the first one, and that wasn't very good. The second was Stephen Moffat and someone else. This week's episode was Mark Gackus, and next week is Stephen Moffat, and it's a spooky episode. But you never know, it may actually be scary. It may have an episode which is just as scary as the Weeping Angels episodes. Maybe. Well, we'll soon see. I'm very optimistic now, having had 2 episodes back to back which have been good. In fact, gone from good to fantastic. So next week, let's hope that the episode is whatever would come after fantastic. Awesome! Let's hope the next week's episode is awesome and brilliant and inspired, and we can watch the rest of the series without worrying that the series is in the hand of a man who can't write. Whatever. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you have anything you would like to add to this little synopsis, little look at Doctor Who, maybe you agree with some points I raised, maybe you disagree, maybe there's some questions you want to ask me myself, then by all means leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll probably read them out next week. Because if next week's episode is just as good as this one, then I'll probably need something to make up the time with. Anyway, thank you for listening, and goodbye.